My name is Lauren. I'm 28 and live alone. 3 weeks ago, I drove home for my mom's early Christmas dinner. After we ate, she stood with a gift bag and handed presents to everyone at the table but me. I asked, "Is there one for me?" She didn't hesitate. "Be grateful you can sit here." My Uncle Chuck added, "Be glad we still remember your name." Laughter went around the table. I said, "Good to know." And something inside me went very quiet. That was the moment I stopped trying to earn my seat. What they didn't know, what none of them had ever bothered to learn, was that I wasn't just the quiet niece who worked some finance job in Chicago. I was a certified financial planner and estate attorney with dual licensure in 3 states, and for the past 4 years, I had been the sole administrator of the Hartwell Family Trust, a $4.2 million portfolio that Grandma Eleanor had quietly built over 50 years and left entirely under my control. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me take you back to the beginning. I grew up as the invisible child. My older sister Madison was the beauty queen, homecoming royalty 3 years running. My younger brother Tyler was the golden boy, captain of the football team, scholarship athlete, the one who made my father beam with pride at every family gathering. And me? I was just Lauren, the one who read too much, the one who asked uncomfortable questions, the one who got straight A's but somehow still managed to disappoint everyone by pursuing law instead of something useful like nursing or teaching. "You think you're better than us," my mother said once when I got accepted to Northwestern on a full academic scholarship. "Going to that fancy school, you'll forget where you came from." I didn't forget. I remembered every single slight, every dismissive comment, every time I was made to feel like an afterthought in my own family. I just learned to file them away, the way I filed case documents and trust agreements. Quietly, methodically, with timestamps. When Grandma Eleanor passed away 5 years ago, the family expected her modest estate to be divided equally among her 3 children, my mother Janet, my Uncle Chuck, and my Aunt Patricia. What they got instead was a legal bombshell delivered by a stone-faced attorney from a firm in Milwaukee, the Hartwell Family Trust. Eleanor Hartwell had been quietly investing her teacher's pension and her late husband's life insurance for 50 years. She had also been watching how her children treated each other, how they treated their own kids, how they handled money and responsibility and basic human decency, and she had made her decision. The trust was structured as a discretionary family trust with a single trustee, me. Not my mother, who had borrowed against her retirement twice and never paid it back. Not Uncle Chuck, who had declared bankruptcy and blamed everyone but himself. Not Aunt Patricia, who had stolen money from the church collection plate and been quietly asked to leave the congregation. Me. Eleanor had called me the summer before she died, when I was studying for the bar exam. "Lauren," she said, her voice thin but steady, "you're the only one in this family who understands that money isn't just money. It's power, it's responsibility, it's the difference between lifting people up and keeping them dependent." I didn't fully understand what she meant until I read the trust documents. As trustee, I had complete discretionary authority over distributions. I could provide for the health, education, maintenance, and support of any family member, or not, based solely on my judgment. The trust couldn't be challenged, couldn't be modified, couldn't be touched without my signature. Eleanor had hired the best estate attorneys in the Midwest to make sure of that. The family was furious when they found out. My mother sobbed. Uncle Chuck threatened to sue. Aunt Patricia accused me of manipulating a dying woman. But Eleanor had anticipated all of this. She had included a video statement recorded 6 months before her death, where she looked directly into the camera and said, "I am of sound mind and body. I chose Lauren as my trustee because she is the only member of this family I trust not to squander what I've built. If any of you challenge this trust, you will receive nothing. If you accept Lauren's authority, she will provide for you fairly. The choice is yours." They chose to accept, not gracefully, but they accepted. What they didn't know was that Eleanor had also left me a private letter, sealed in a separate envelope, to be opened only after the reading of the will. "My dear Lauren, they will smile to your face and curse you behind your back. They will flatter you when they need money and despise you when they don't. This is the nature of the family you were born into. But you are strong, stronger than they know. Watch them carefully, keep records, and when the time comes, you'll know when. Don't hesitate to protect what I've built. With all my love, Grandma Eleanor. I kept that letter in my safe deposit box, and I kept records. 4 years of meticulous records. For the first year after Eleanor's death, I tried to be fair. I approved distributions for legitimate needs: medical bills, college tuition, home repairs. I established a quarterly allowance for each of the 3 main beneficiaries: my mother, Uncle Chuck, and Aunt Patricia. The amounts weren't extravagant, but they were consistent and generous by any reasonable standard. But reasonable wasn't what they wanted. My mother complained that Madison deserved a bigger wedding fund. Uncle Chuck demanded I pay off his boat loan. Aunt Patricia wanted me to cover her gambling debts, which she euphemistically called investment losses. I declined each request with a formal letter and a citation to the trust provisions. They hated me for it. The quarterly family dinners became exercises in passive-aggressive warfare. My mother would make pointed comments about people who forget their place. Uncle Chuck would loudly discuss how some people let a little power go to their heads. Madison and Tyler would exchange knowing smirks whenever I spoke, and I sat there, silent, eating my turkey and mashed potatoes and pretending I couldn't hear the whispers. But I heard everything, and I documented everything. The subscription payments started innocuously enough. My mother mentioned her gym membership was due, and could I just put it on my card, just this once? I'll pay you back. I did. She didn't. Then it was Madison's Netflix, Tyler's Spotify Premium, Uncle Chuck's Amazon Prime, Aunt Patricia's yoga studio membership, my mother's streaming services. 3 different ones because apparently she needed Hulu and HBO Max and Paramount Plus. I kept a spreadsheet. Dates, amounts, promises made, promises broken. Over 3 years, the total reached $27,843. $27,000 I had paid out of my own pocket while administering a multi-million-dollar trust from which I received 0 compensation. $27,000 that bought me the privilege of being mocked at family dinners and excluded from gift exchanges. But here's what they never understood. The money didn't matter to me. I earned more than enough at my firm in Chicago. What mattered was the principle. What mattered was how casually they took advantage of me while treating me like an outsider. What mattered was that I was learning exactly who they were. The Thanksgiving dinner wasn't my breaking point. It was my confirmation. I had driven 4 hours in holiday traffic, bringing 2 homemade pies and a bottle of wine that cost more than anything else on the table. I had sat through dinner listening to my mother praise Madison's entrepreneurial spirit — she was selling essential oils on Instagram — and Tyler's leadership potential. He had been fired from 2 jobs and was living in my parents' basement. And then came the presents. My mother had wrapped each gift in identical gold paper with red ribbons. She went around the table like Santa Claus, beaming as she handed packages to Madison, Tyler, Uncle Chuck, Aunt Patricia, even the cousins I barely knew. When she reached my seat, she paused, just for a moment, just long enough for everyone to notice. "Is there one for me?" I asked. She smiled, not a kind smile, the smile of someone who had been waiting for this moment. "Be grateful you can sit here," she said. Uncle Chuck leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, grinning like he'd just won a prize. "Be glad we still remember your name." The table erupted in laughter. Not nervous laughter, not uncomfortable laughter. Real, genuine amusement at my expense. I looked around. Madison was covering her mouth, shoulders shaking. Tyler wasn't even trying to hide his grin. Aunt Patricia nodded approvingly at my mother like she'd finally put me in my place. "Good to know," I said. And something inside me went very quiet. Not hurt, not angry, just quiet. The way a computer goes quiet when it finishes a calculation. The way a lock clicks into place when you finally turn the key. I finished my dinner. I helped clear the table. I hugged everyone goodbye and told them to have a Merry Christmas. I drove back to Chicago in silence, not even turning on the radio. When I got home, I dropped my keys on the counter, put the leftover pie in the trash, and sat on my kitchen floor. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just sat there in the dark, letting the quiet fill every corner of my mind. Then I opened my laptop. I had work to do. The first thing I did was pull up the trust accounting software. Every transaction, every distribution, every penny that had flowed in and out of the Hartwell Family Trust over the past 4 years. Then I opened my personal spreadsheet. The subscription payments, the loans that were never repaid, the emergency funds that turned out to be shopping sprees. I created a new document and titled it Beneficiary Conduct Review. For the next 3 hours, I compiled a comprehensive record of every interaction I'd had with my family members in their capacity as trust beneficiaries, every request for distributions, every complaint about my decisions, every time they had violated the spirit, if not the letter, of Eleanor's wishes. The trust documents included a provision I had never invoked, Section 7.3, subsection C. The trustee may, at her sole discretion, reduce or eliminate distributions to any beneficiary who demonstrates a pattern of financial irresponsibility, ingratitude, or conduct contrary to the grantor's expressed values. Eleanor had been very specific about those values: thrift, self-reliance, respect for family, kindness. I thought about the laughter at that dinner table. I thought about $27,000 of subscriptions and loans and emergencies. I thought about 15 years of being treated like an afterthought, and I began to plan. My best friend Mia called at midnight. I had texted her from the car just a brief message. They did it again. "Tell me everything," she said. So I did. The gift bag, the comment, the laughter, the quiet that had settled into my bones. Mia was silent for a long moment. Then she said very calmly, "Lauren, that's not normal. That's not teasing. That's mean. They don't respect you at all." "I know. So what are you going to do?" I looked at my laptop screen. The trust documents were open in one tab, the subscription spreadsheet in another, the beneficiary conduct review in a third. "I'm going to give them exactly what they've been asking for," I said. "I'm going to let them stand on their own." "What does that mean?" "It means I'm done being their safety net. I'm done being their invisible wallet. I'm done trying to earn a seat at a table that was never meant for me." Mia was quiet again. Then, "About damn time," I laughed. It felt strange, laughing, but it also felt good. "Walk me through it," she said. "What's the plan?" So I told her. Step 1 was the subscriptions. Over the next week, I systematically canceled every recurring payment that benefited my family members: gym memberships, streaming services, Amazon Prime, the Uber credits I'd set up for my mother, the DoorDash account Madison borrowed whenever she was too lazy to cook. Each cancellation came with a confirmation email. I saved everyone. Step 2 was the loans. I compiled a detailed accounting of every dollar I had loaned or given to family members over the past 3 years. Then I drafted individual letters to each of them, politely requesting repayment within 30 days. These weren't threatening letters. They weren't accusatory. They simply stated the facts. "On this date, you requested this amount for this purpose. Per our agreement, you stated you would repay by this date. That date has passed. Please remit payment at your earliest convenience." I had the letters notarized and sent them by certified mail with return receipt requested. Step 3 was the trust. This was the delicate part. I couldn't simply cut off distributions. That would violate my fiduciary duty as trustee, but I could review the current distribution schedule and make adjustments based on documented beneficiary conduct. I spent a weekend going through every request for extra distributions that had been made over the past 4 years. Uncle Chuck's boat loan? Denied. That wasn't a legitimate health, education, maintenance, or support expense. Madison's wedding fund? Reduced. She hadn't set a date, hadn't chosen a venue, hadn't even gotten engaged. The monthly allowance I'd been sending my mother above and beyond the quarterly distribution? Discontinued. The trust didn't require it, and her conduct had demonstrated a lack of appreciation. I documented every decision. I cited every provision. I created a paper trail so clean you could eat off it. And then I waited. The first wave hit 3 days after I canceled the subscriptions. My phone exploded. The family group chat, which I had muted but not left, was a wall of outrage. "Mom, some people forget who raised them. Canceling my gym membership is attacking my health. Yoga is the only thing keeping me sane. Do you want to push me over the edge?" Madison. Imagine choosing Netflix over your own family. LOL. "You've changed so much, Lauren. You used to be nice." Uncle Chuck. "This is what happens when you give people power they can't handle. She thinks she's better than us because she has a fancy job." Tyler. Classic Lauren. Can't take a joke, so she has to ruin Christmas for everyone. I read every message. I screenshotted every message. And I didn't respond. The certified letters arrived 2 days later. I know because Aunt Patricia called me, screaming, at 6:47 a.m. on a Tuesday. "You sent me a bill? For money I borrowed? What kind of person does that to family?" I let her finish. It took about 3 minutes. "Patricia," I said when she finally ran out of steam, "the letter clearly states the amounts you borrowed and the dates you promised to repay them. It's not a bill, it's a reminder. If you'd like to discuss a payment plan, I'm happy to arrange a time." She hung up on me. That was fine. I had the call logged. I had the letter receipts. I had the documentation. By the end of the week, all 3 certified letters had been received. None had been responded to. All 3 recipients had, however, taken to social media to express their feelings. Uncle Chuck posted a black and white photo with text overlay. "Some people cut off blood over money. Remember who was there before the paycheck." My mother commented, "So sad but true. Love you, baby." Madison shared a quote, "Family over everything. Money can't buy loyalty." The irony was almost too perfect to be real. I screenshot everything. I saved everything. And I continued to wait. What they didn't know was that the subscriptions and the loans were just the opening moves. The real chess game was happening behind the scenes. The Hartwell Family Trust operated on a quarterly distribution schedule. The next distribution date was January 15th, 3 weeks after Christmas. I had until then to complete my review. The trust documents gave me broad discretionary power, but they also required me to act in good faith and in accordance with Eleanor's expressed intentions. I couldn't just cut everyone off because they hurt my feelings. I needed documentation. I needed a pattern. I needed to prove that my decisions were based on legitimate factors, not personal vendetta. So I built my case. I pulled records from the trust's first 4 years. I documented every request, every distribution, every communication. I created a timeline showing how each beneficiary's behavior had changed over time, how they had started with gratitude and gradually shifted to entitlement, then to hostility. I compiled the social media posts where they mocked me publicly, the group chat messages where they discussed me as if I wasn't a member, the certified letter receipts showing they had received my repayment requests and ignored them. And I found something else, something I hadn't been looking for. Uncle Chuck had been lying about his finances. The trust documents required beneficiaries to provide annual financial disclosures, a basic accounting of income, expenses, and assets. It was a standard provision, designed to help the trustee make informed decisions about distributions. Uncle Chuck's disclosures showed modest income and significant expenses. He painted himself as barely getting by, just a regular guy who needed family support to make ends meet. But when I cross-referenced his disclosures with public records, I found something interesting. He had purchased a boat 3 years ago, the same boat he'd asked me to pay off, a $45,000 boat purchased in cash, not financed, cash. He had also transferred ownership of his vacation cabin to his adult son 2 years ago, a cabin that had been in the family for decades and was worth approximately $180,000. And he had been receiving income from a small rental property that he had never disclosed to me. In other words, Uncle Chuck wasn't struggling. He was hiding assets and income to maximize his trust distributions while minimizing his obligations. This wasn't just ingratitude. This was fraud. I documented everything. I consulted with a colleague who specialized in trust litigation, and I added a new section to my beneficiary conduct review: material misrepresentation and breach of trust provisions. The next quarterly distribution was going to be very different. The family decided to escalate things 2 weeks before Christmas. I was working late at my apartment, reviewing documents for a client matter when my buzzer rang. I checked the intercom camera and felt my stomach drop. My parents, standing in the lobby. My mother was holding a shiny red gift bag. I didn't answer. The buzzer rang again, and again, and again. My phone lit up. Mom calling, Dad calling, Madison texting. "They're outside your door, just open it. Don't make this worse." I typed back, "They showed up uninvited. That's on them." A few minutes later, there was knocking at my door, then pounding. "Lauren, honey, open up." My mother's voice carried through the door. "We brought you something. We just want to talk before Christmas. It's the holidays, sweetie." I stayed silent. The knocking intensified. "We drove 4 hours to be here," my mother said, her voice shifting from sweet to sharp. "The least you can do is open the door and speak to your own parents." My father's voice cut in. "We're not doing this through a door, Lauren. Open it. Now." I took a deep breath. Then I spoke, loud enough to be heard clearly through the door. "You need to leave. I told you I didn't want visitors. You came anyway, that's trespassing." Silence. Then my mother laughed, a high, brittle sound. "Trespassing? We're your parents. We have every right to—" "You don't," I said. "I'm asking you to leave. If you don't leave in the next 5 minutes, I'm calling building security and the police." More silence. Then my father's voice, low and dangerous. "You think you can threaten us? After everything we've done for you?" "I'm not threatening anyone. I'm stating facts. You're in my building without invitation. You're banging on my door. You're harassing me. I have every right to ask you to leave, and I'm exercising that right." I heard my mother say something to my father, too quiet to make out. Then the knocking resumed, harder than before. "Open this door right now!" my mother screamed. "Do you hear yourself? That city has ruined you. You're destroying this family, and you don't even care." I pulled out my phone and dialed. "This is Lauren Hartwell in apartment 4B. My family has shown up uninvited and is currently pounding on my door and screaming. I've asked them to leave multiple times. Can you send security?" The pounding stopped. I heard muffled conversation in the hallway. "We're leaving," my father called through the door. "But this isn't over. You need to think about what you're doing, Lauren. You need to think about the consequences." I listened to their footsteps fade down the hallway. Then I went to my laptop and typed up a detailed account of what had just happened. Time, date, what was said, how I responded. I emailed it to myself with the subject line, "Incident Report, December 11th. Then I opened my trust review document and added a new entry, "Harassment and intimidation by beneficiaries during off-distribution period." They thought they were making a power play. They didn't realize they were just adding to my documentation. The January 15th distribution letters went out on January 3rd, giving beneficiaries 12 days to review the changes before the funds were disbursed. I had drafted each letter carefully, with input from my colleague in trust litigation. They were professional, detailed, and devastating. To my mother, Janet Hartwell, following a comprehensive review of trust administration over the past 4 years, I am modifying your quarterly distribution as follows. Your supplemental allowance, historically $500 month, is being discontinued effective immediately. This allowance was provided at my discretion as trustee and is not required by the trust instrument. Given recent communications demonstrating a lack of appreciation for trust distributions and hostility toward the trustee, continuation of this discretionary benefit is not warranted. Additionally, your base quarterly distribution is being reduced by 15% per Section 7.3 AC, based on documented conduct contrary to the grantor's expressed values, specifically public disparagement of the trustee, failure to demonstrate gratitude for trust benefits, and participation in harassment of the trustee at her personal residence on December 11th. To Uncle Chuck, following a review of your annual financial disclosures compared with public records, I have identified material discrepancies that constitute a breach of trust provisions. Specifically, undisclosed income from rental property, undisclosed asset transfer to family member, and misrepresentation of financial status. Pursuant to Section 4.2b, beneficiaries who provide false information may have distributions suspended pending investigation. Your quarterly distribution is suspended effective immediately. You may request reinstatement by providing complete and accurate financial disclosure within 30 days. To Aunt Patricia, following a review of distribution requests over the past 4 years, I have determined that multiple requests were made for purposes not covered by the Trust's HEMS standard. Your quarterly distribution is being reduced by 25% per Section 7.3c, based on documented pattern of requesting distributions for prohibited purposes, gambling debts characterized as investment losses. The letters were sent by certified mail, and then I waited for the explosion. It came faster than I expected. Within 48 hours, I had received 3 voicemails, which I did not answer, 14 text messages, which I screenshotted but did not respond to, and 1 letter threatening to sue me for breach of fiduciary duty. The letter was from a lawyer Uncle Chuck had found, presumably a personal injury attorney moonlighting in estate matters based on the quality of the legal reasoning. I forwarded it to my colleague in trust litigation. He called me 20 minutes later, laughing. "Lauren, this is garbage. He's claiming you can't reduce distributions based on personal feelings, but Section 7.3c explicitly gives you that discretion for conduct contrary to the grantor's values. And the fraud documentation you compiled? That's not just grounds for suspension, that's grounds for complete termination of his beneficiary status." "I know," I said. I was hoping he'd challenge it. There was a pause. Then, Oh, that's clever. If he takes this to court, everything becomes public record, his financial disclosures, his hidden assets, his lies, and I have Eleanor's video statement showing she specifically chose me because she didn't trust her own children with money. You want him to sue you. I want him to do whatever he's going to do. I'm prepared either way. The lawsuit was filed 3 weeks later. Charles Chuck Hartwell versus Lauren Hartwell, trustee of the Eleanor M. Hartwell Family Trust. The complaint alleged breach of fiduciary duty, self-dealing, undue influence, and about 4 other causes of action that my colleague assured me were legally baseless. But the real gift was discovery. In litigation, both sides have to produce documents. Uncle Chuck's lawyer, who was clearly in over his head, had to turn over everything. Bank statements, tax returns, property records, everything. What emerged was even worse than I had documented. Uncle Chuck hadn't just hidden assets. He had been systematically looting the family for years. He had borrowed money from my mother, who borrowed from the trust to pay him. He had convinced Aunt Patricia to co-sign loans that she then paid off with trust distributions. He had created a web of financial manipulation that had been draining the family for decades. And he had been positioning himself to challenge the trust from the beginning, waiting for Eleanor to die, waiting for the right moment to claim his fair share. The video deposition was particularly illuminating. "Mr. Hartwell, you testified that you have no rental income. Can you explain this bank statement showing monthly deposits from Hartwell Properties LLC? That's not income. That's a loan repayment. From yourself to yourself? Hartwell Properties LLC is wholly owned by you, correct?" I need to speak with my lawyer." The case was dismissed 6 months later. Uncle Chuck was found to have made material misrepresentations to the trustee and was permanently removed as a beneficiary of the Hartwell Family Trust. But the fallout went further than that. The publicity from the lawsuit, which Uncle Chuck had stupidly made public by filing in open court, destroyed his reputation in our small hometown. The local paper ran a story, "Local man loses lawsuit against niece, accused of financial fraud. His rental tenants found out he had been hiding income while claiming poverty. They organized and demanded repairs he had been deferring for years. He couldn't afford to fix the property without access to trust funds, so he was forced to sell, at a loss. His adult son, the one he had transferred the cabin to, discovered that the transfer had been structured in a way that created significant tax liability. The IRS came calling, liens were filed, Christmas at the Hartwell cabin was canceled that year and every year after, and Uncle Chuck, who had spent decades positioning himself as the patriarch of the family, became a cautionary tale, the uncle no one talked to anymore, the one who had challenged Lauren and lost everything. The rest of the family learned from his mistake. My mother sent me a letter, handwritten on actual stationery, 2 months after the lawsuit was dismissed. It wasn't quite an apology. It was more of an acknowledgement. "I have behaved badly," she wrote. "I don't know if you can forgive me, and I'm not asking for that. I'm asking for a chance to do better." I didn't respond immediately. I let the letter sit on my desk for a week while I thought about what I wanted. Then I wrote back, "I accept your acknowledgement. If you want to rebuild our relationship, it will have to be on new terms. You will treat me with respect. You will not discuss trust matters in family settings. You will not ask me for money outside of formal distribution requests. If you can agree to these conditions, we can begin again." She agreed. The relationship that emerged wasn't warm exactly, but it was honest. My mother had finally realized that she couldn't bully or manipulate me anymore, that I held real power and was willing to use it. And with that realization came a kind of grudging respect that had never existed before. Madison and Tyler followed suit, mostly because they had no choice. With Uncle Chuck out of the picture, I was now the sole decision-maker for a trust that would eventually distribute millions of dollars. Fighting me meant losing access to that money. Accepting me meant learning to behave. They learned. 3 years later, I was sitting in my new office, a corner space with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Lake Michigan, reviewing the quarterly trust report. The Hartwell Family Trust had grown by 40% since I took over. Careful management, strategic investments, and the elimination of fraudulent drain had transformed it into a genuine legacy for future generations. I had established educational funds for the children in the family, real educational funds with proper oversight and clear conditions. I had created a charitable giving program in Eleanor's name. I had built something that would last, and I had done it all without ever raising my voice, without ever losing my temper, without ever giving them the satisfaction of seeing me break. On my desk was a framed copy of Eleanor's letter, the one she had left for me alone. They will smile to your face and curse you behind your back. They will flatter you when they need money and despise you when they don't. This is the nature of the family you were born into, but you are strong, stronger than they know. I smiled at those words every morning, because she was right. I was strong, stronger than they had ever imagined. And now they knew it too. The following Christmas, I hosted dinner for the first time. It was a small gathering, just my mother, Madison, Tyler, and Aunt Patricia. Uncle Chuck was not invited. Neither were his lawyers. I served the meal myself. Turkey, mashed potatoes, green beans, 2 kinds of pie. I set a place for everyone at the table I had bought with money I earned myself, in an apartment I owned outright, in a city where I had built a life completely separate from their influence. When it was time for gifts, I went around the table and handed each person a wrapped package. Small things, meaningful things. A first edition of my mother's favorite book, a spa certificate for Madison, sports memorabilia for Tyler, a charitable donation in Aunt Patricia's name. When I sat back down, my mother looked at me with an expression I had never seen before. "Lauren," she said, her voice catching slightly, "thank you for all of this." I nodded. "You're welcome." And something in the room shifted. It wasn't forgiveness exactly. The past couldn't be erased. The years of dismissal and mockery and exclusion had happened, and they would always have happened. But this was something new. A beginning, maybe. A chance for something different. Tyler cleared his throat. I wanted to say something." He looked uncomfortable, like the words were being pulled out of him against his will. "I was a jerk to you, for a long time. I'm sorry." Madison nodded quickly. "Me too. I'm sorry, Lauren." I looked at them, really looked at them, maybe for the first time in years. They weren't the cruel strangers who had laughed at me around that Thanksgiving table. They were just people. Flawed, foolish people who had been taught that power came from putting others down. I had shown them a different kind of power, the quiet kind, the kind that comes from competence and preparation and the willingness to wait. "I appreciate that," I said. "Let's eat." We ate. We talked, carefully at first, then more freely. By the end of the night, Madison was telling a story about a disastrous first date, and everyone was laughing. Not at anyone, just laughing. As I walked them to the door, my mother paused. She put her hand on my arm, gently, almost hesitantly. "I'm proud of you," she said. "I should have told you that a long time ago. I'm proud of who you've become." I looked at her, the woman who had publicly humiliated me, the woman who had excluded me from gift exchanges and mocked me to her siblings, the woman who had tried to use guilt and manipulation to control me. She wasn't that woman anymore. Or maybe she was, and she was also something else. Someone capable of growth, of change, of finally seeing what had been in front of her all along. "Thank you," I said, and I meant it. That night, after everyone had left, I stood at my window and looked out at the city lights. I thought about Eleanor, and the trust she had placed in me. I thought about the years of quiet preparation, the careful documentation, the strategic patience that had brought me to this moment. I thought about the family I had been born into and the family I was choosing to build. They didn't know, none of them had ever known, what they had in me. They saw a quiet girl who read too much and asked uncomfortable questions. They saw an afterthought, an outsider, a convenient target for their insecurities. What they didn't see was the woman I was becoming, the woman who kept receipts, the woman who understood that real power isn't loud. It's quiet, patient, and absolutely merciless when necessary. I had won, not by fighting them, but by becoming someone they couldn't ignore. Not by seeking revenge, but by building a life so complete that their approval became irrelevant. And the sweetest part? They finally knew it too. I smiled, turned off the lights, and went to bed. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities, new chances to build the life I wanted. But tonight I slept well. I had earned my seat at the table. And this time, it was the head of the table. This time, it was mine.